The business portion of the meeting is now adjourned, and I will turn over the rest of the program to Lorraine HARTIN-GELARDI.
All righty. Thank you so much, Teresa. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome the Reverend Samuel Speers. He is the Associate Dean for Religious and Spiritual Life and Contemplative Practices at Vassar College, and that is a long list of accomplishments. You can read a great deal about him because he has had a long time at Vassar College, 20 years working with the youth, and I think that's why a lot of us are anxious to hear him, to find out how we are going to pass the torch. But before Sam starts, I want to let you know something about him. I have listened to Sam share stories at the Bayet at Vassar College. I have sat in Vassar Chapel and listened to him speak during lessons and carols. Sam is a person who speaks directly from the heart, and he is an extremely thoughtful person. He speaks with thought behind every word. So you are definitely in for a treat. I believe his person is why he is so good at working with the youth on Vassar and in other colleges. I do want to remind you that we are going to have a Q&A at the end of this. So I know some of you are going to be listening so intently that you won't have time to write down your questions. Others of you will be writing down as Sam speaks. Please put all of your questions in the chat, and then when Sam is finished, we will have a lively and wonderful discussion. Sam, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lorraine. It's really an honor to be with you. So Susan and I practiced, and I successfully shared my screen in the practice session. And, you know, being of a generation that is not an expert in such things, I'm happy to see it show up here. And I'll move it into presentation mode. And here we go. Look, it's just a wonderful honor to be with you. Thank you for your very warm introduction, Lorraine. It's wonderful to be with you again and to remember our times together, storytelling in the Bayet. And it's nice to see some familiar faces and many faces I don't know. I also want to give a special welcome to my colleagues here at Vassar who've joined us today, our circle of advisors, Linda Tuttle, Reverend Lee Hall, Rabbi Brian Mann, our new rabbi who's been here for over a year, and also our newest member, Mariam Sharif, our advisor for Muslim students. Mariam can't stay with us, and if it's okay, I might just give her a moment to say hello so you can all meet her, because she has to leave in just a couple of minutes, but she's been here for the whole meeting. Mariam, are you still here?
I am still here.
Beautiful.
You can't see me, but greetings, everyone. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you, Mariam. Really appreciate you being here. So I really see this. I appreciated the introduction very much in terms of thinking about how do we connect with the next generation. And I really see this as a wonderful chance to open up a conversation between the work we do and the work of the Interfaith Council, and how we might find some mutual interests for partnership and collaboration. And I hope this might lead us in that direction. I'm here to talk about, particularly about Pratt House, which is about to be the new home for the office, something where we're quite excited about. I might say, by way of introduction, just what an exciting moment this is for us at the college. This, under the leadership of President Elizabeth Bradley and Dean of the College, Carlos Alamo, to whom I report, Carlos Alamo Pastrana, we've seen more changes in the area of religious and spiritual life in the last 5 years than in my entire 22 years at the college. It includes a new kosher kitchen for campus dining, for all campus dining, and much more resources for halal dining as well. It includes a new Muslim prayer space on campus, a dedicated space for Muslim prayer. the announcement of Pratt House as our new space for respite, gathering, and contemplative practices. And also, and I'll speak about this a bit more later on, our participation in a program through Hillel International called the Organizational Design Lab. We were one of 8 or 9 campuses who were learning the tools of student-centered design thinking and how they might apply to the work we do on campus. And here at Vassar, we've tried to take that approach and apply it to all of the work we do, not just our work in Jewish life. We have also seen the arrival of new staff here at the college. Rabbi Brian Mann, who's here today, joined us last year. This is his 2nd year now as Racklin Director for Jewish Student Life and Assistant Director within the office. Mariam Sharif, whom you just heard from, sorry about that, begins as our newly expanded position for our advisor for Muslim student life, a part-time position. And then we're especially excited, the renovations on Pratt House began, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. To tell you a little bit more about this organizational design thinking approach, without going into too much detail, the thing I would really want to underscore that this has meant for us, without getting into too much jargon around design thinking, is it's really been a deep dive in very attentive listening to where students are coming from. And to really, to finally take seriously something that I feel like I've been slow to learn in my 20 years at the college, is the place to start in our work is with the students. The students are the ones who actually have the best knowledge and understanding of what it's like to navigate the changing religious and spiritual landscape of today's college campus. And that's the place to start. Don't act as if, we on the staff, have the wisdom from on high to share with students to figure out all the programming that's needed and then recruit them to the programming. But instead, through a process of deep listening, pay attention to where students are coming from, convey to them that our agenda is nothing more and nothing less than them and our relationship with them, rather than recruiting them to come to our services and programs. And you really start to see a change in the range and type of students that we connect with. And I think we've started to see that. So I want to tell you a little bit about what came out of the interviews, the intensive interviews that we did with students. We had a script that Hillel International shared with us that we adapted for our context. And the first time we did it with about 30 students, there were lots of insights. We could go into more detail with it, but we distilled over a course of 2 days of workshops, we distilled all of what we saw in those 30 interviews into a new how might we statement for the office that became a kind of mission statement. I'll try to avoid always reading what's up before you in the PowerPoint. You all can read it yourselves, but I would highlight really students' interest in real meaning making and resisting their experiences of burnout on campus, and really finding spaces where they could bring their messy, joyful, full selves. And we really try to do that in the work we do. Out of this approach, we tried 3 new initiatives on campus. One was a program of, if you will, community building for community builders on campus. We put out a call for proposals, and we were surprised that we got 40 applications when we only had 20 spaces in this program. And that alone was a real change for us. And a whole new group of students came to be part of that program that we hadn't connected with before. Another initiative we did with the Shabbat design team, and that's something that still continues to this day. The students had the idea of not coming up with a new midweek ritual, but a new communal gathering each week, dinners in our bayit, which is our home for Jewish life on campus. This is a program that continues to this day, 15 to 20 students attending. Rabbi Brian tells me it was the first request from our students in the Vassar Jewish Union when COVID dining restrictions were lifted. And then the third thing, and I'll talk more about this, get into the details of it, is the Pratt design team. we knew we needed to hear from students about what this new space for the office might look like. And out of this, let me just mention a little bit about our second process of discovery interviews. Last year, we did over 40 interviews, producing over 100 pages. This time it was almost entirely done by students, which is unusual in the organizational design lab cohort of campuses. And they identified 3 particular issues that they wanted to see us address, as you can see on your screen here. And not surprisingly, they were especially wondering in the pandemic about issues of social isolation. And out of that, they developed 3 new "how might we" kinds of questions. Not surprisingly, really a lot of attention to the constant stress that students feel under in this kind of a context. We could talk more about that in terms of what you see among high school students related to that. And really providing for students deep desire for meaning making and connection, particularly in a time of social isolation. I was especially struck by how much students reminded us simply having fun is profoundly transformational and healing. Thank you, Lorraine. And what does it mean to really slow down? How do we make time to do that? That's hard for all of us, myself included. And a lot of important things came out about the rewards and the challenges of being part of particular religious communities on campus. And we're trying to pay attention to that. Out of all of that, the students, and this was entirely student driven, not coming from staff, had the idea of having our first ever spring festival, bringing together all of the students from our different religious communities on campus. And we'd never done something quite like this before. And students knew coming together in the time of the pandemic would be very powerful, and they timed it right for when things were opening up and more people could gather. You see here students in our Buddhist Sangha that's advised by faculty member James McCowan, though he's not in the picture. Our Vassar Catholic community with affiliate advisor Linda Tuttle, our Episcopal community with affiliate advisor Reverend Lee Hall. One of the communities growing on campus is our Sikh community. We've really seen a lot more visibility from Sikh students on campus, which we've been thrilled about. And we were very grateful that spring truly showed up, as you can see from this photo, on our spring festival. Students had the idea, again, and utterly student-driven, of sharing the story of what we'd done in the student paper. And it ended up being, frankly, the best article on the office in my 22 years at the college, because it was entirely student-driven and entirely student voices, no quotes from any of the staff. The picture shout out in the newspaper article was of our Chabad Jewish community. That's Dalia Sanoff, an affiliate advisor in process on campus at their table at that spring festival. And the students had a bonfire night with our poetry group, another joyful way of being outside. So then let me tell you a little bit more about the process that we went through coming up with the design for this new space that we're moving into. In this left-hand picture, I'd want to highlight here Ziad Jamaluddin, the architect from Left Architects, who, with his whole team of people, including Stefan here at the center of this picture on the left, walked us through 7 different design and planning meetings, 3 of them in person, 4 of them virtual. Over 80 people participated in these meetings. Most of those were students, but we also consulted with our faculty and administrator campus partners. And out of that, let me just mention one other thing here about the whole process. We put together a letter that we shared each time we had these conversations with people, indicating just kind of our general hopes. And I really do think this letter has stood the test of time. I'd be happy to share with anybody who's interested, particularly our interest in hospitality and being a welcoming home for all students and their questions of meaning making on campus. These are the kinds of things that came out of the design process. I could get into the details more in the Q&A, and rather than go over each of these, I'm going to keep going with the slides here so we can get to more time for discussion. So here's what the space looks like. And really, it's a relatively small space. Sorry about that. It's a relatively small space. On the first floor, we have this multi-purpose gathering space. This is the former dining room, and this is the living room space. We also have this kitchen here that we've expanded and added on a new sink and refrigerator and stovetop in part of the kitchen that you'll see in a moment. And in particular, we've added an elevator that allows us access to storage in the basement and then from the ground floor to the second floor. And this is what these new spaces will look like. These are renderings from our architect. And this is the new part of the kitchen with the new refrigerator, new sink, and stovetop. And part of what we're excited about here is this is, if you will, our ritual kitchen that can become our halal kitchen or our kosher kitchen. We've paid attention to the materials we need to kosher it if we want to do that. And then you'll see these doors that open and close to mark when the ritual kitchen is in use. I don't know if anybody notices the design that's etched into the screen that's in front of it. It looks like just a cool design. It's the lunar calendar. So we like that it has a design element, but we also like it marks to communities that observe the lunar calendar that we see them and recognize them. Again, paying attention to particular communities and their particular practices. This is what the living room lounge area will look like. And it's set up to be intentionally a multi-purpose space. These tables come apart to be set up as a lounge like this, and they also can come together to all sit together around one table. And really there are multiple configurations. This is a little video of the different ways the table is going to be put together, all designed by our architects at Left Architects. Then moving up to the second floor, people really emphasized needing office space where staff are visible. We've never had a space before where all of the staff within the office are in the same building. And so these are our three offices for the staff hired by the college. Myself, Mariam Sharif, our Muslim advisor, and Rabbi Brian Mann. We also have a new workstation for Annie Sampagnaro, administrative assistant. She'll be the first welcoming face as you come up the stairs or get off the elevator, and a new conference room available to all of our communities on campus, including our affiliate advisors that comfortably seats 6 to 8 people. Our new prayer and meditation space that we've never had before on campus, something quite like this. And the restroom includes a wudu station or ablution sink for the different communities that have ritual washing before their prayers. I can show you a little more about this meditation and prayer space. You'll see we're on the second floor and we have a third floor space here. The architect, seeing that the third floor space wasn't really usable because of code reasons for programming, helped us, if you will, literally take the lid off of prayer and meditation at the college by taking off the ceiling to the second floor, revealing the light from the third floor, and then putting in a skylight to bring in light from the sky, a kind of reminder that there's something larger than us beyond us as you gather in that space. And then you get more of a picture of how the light comes into the room, that improve ventilation in the time of COVID and better for sustainability. We can open up that skylight. And this is what that new space looks like with the raised ceiling within the room. And this is a new staircase up to the third floor, which has storage. And then this next slide kind of shows you what the light will look like over the course of a day. We particularly like how this new exposure to light, marks the prayer times of any given day as well. Then another feature of the room that we really appreciate is the carpet that the architect designed for us. It looks like an interesting set of designs here, geometric shapes, sorry about that. But really what's going on here is we're again showing particular communities that we recognize them within the community. You might notice that the compass point here at the bottom of the screen marks the directions of east and west, and also specifically both to Mecca and to Jerusalem. So this red triangle here provides a template for the direction of prayer rugs for Juma prayer within the space, because this line here points in the direction of Mecca. This line here, right next to it, between the gray and the green rugs, points in the direction of Jerusalem when we have Jewish prayer within the space. So our Jewish communities know that. This line here is the east-west direction, the orientation for many Christian communities, especially our Roman Catholic communities. Again, our Christian communities are recognized within the space. A circle, of course, is fundamental to many different practices within the community. So that's what the carpet looks like within the space. Getting close to finishing up here, we celebrated the near completion of the space last fall with a special dedication ceremony before we began work on a new labyrinth for the space that I'll say more about in a moment. This is a picture of Mary Ottaway from the class of 1959. She and her husband, Jim Ottaway, are the donors for this space. They are fine with my mentioning them today. They couldn't join us. I did invite them. And here she's sharing the story of what motivated them to share this wonderful gift. We welcomed them into the space. Our interns wrote a script to welcome them in. This is the chalkboard where we'll announce our schedule of activities on any given day and week. That's chalk paint. Here's a student introducing Jim and Mary Ottaway to the space downstairs in the dining area. And these are our smiling interns with Mary Ottaway at the end of this joyful celebration on the Pratt lawn. You'll see this is the poster for it, and then you get a sense of what the new labyrinth looks like. The labyrinth, if you will, is our way of trying to have the grounds of Pratt House echo the purposes of the interior of the building, where the labyrinth in a way signals the centering and gathering aspirations that we have for both the building and the grounds, and of course the labyrinth itself. And this is what the labyrinth looks like. This is actually a picture taken just today. They put down today the sand that will secure the stone in place, and within a week, the labyrinth will be for the first time fully open to the campus community. And that's what the labyrinth looks like outside of Pratt House. One last thing I'd say on a kind of closing note, one other project that happened in the Pratt design process. Students signed up for a class with Professor of Art, Tobias Armborst. He's the professor who teaches architecture at the college, for a project on contemplative spaces on the Vassar campus. Students wrote a new kind of narrative map of the history of religious and spiritual life at the college. And obviously you can't read this here, but we hope to put this student-made map up onto the inside Pratt House to let this student-told story of student initiatives at the campus. And in a way, the story that it tells is that the one constant is change. Students finding creative ways over the years in many different ways of meaning making within new spaces on campus to serve their religious and spiritual needs. And really with that, I want to close and finish up and open up for discussion as we try to think about what are the new forms of meaning making that we might think about together as we think about the mutual interests across our work with young adults and yours. I would note these are some of the possible directions for our conversation. These are some of the kind of continuing questions and challenges that we have as an office. Some of the communities that we feel we haven't reached as much are the athletes and the activists. We're reaching them, but we'd like to see more. How will we really connect with students who are a bit wary of religious and spiritual labels, but are hungry for spiritual connection? And at the same time, how will we stay rooted in a particular work of our office and serve the students who do identify religiously, What is it that our prophetic traditions have to say and speak in our secular moment and in our secular context? I can keep up for a little bit, but I won't read these. These are some of the aspirations that students wrote for the wonderful dedication that we had of the grounds for the labyrinth before we built it. And it felt like an example of what happens when you invite students to be the voices of what matters and what we're trying to do as we create a new space. And the students just really challenged us with their authenticity and their risk-taking. And I wanted to close on what they shared. So that's our presentation. A number of my colleagues are here. I hope they'll have a chance to jump in and speak to their experience at Vassar. It's wonderful to be with you.
Oh, Sam, thank you so much. Really, there are all sorts of people clapping. I don't know if you can see, but we are. I myself can't wait to actually visit Pratt House. What a beautiful space.
We can't wait to welcome you. We really can't. Shall I shut the screen down?
Yes.
Turn the screen down.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I invite people, as I said before, to put their questions in the chat. We have a couple already that I will throw out not only to you, Sam, but to any of your colleagues who are willing to answer, or, you know, we can make this, if somebody has an answer that nobody else has hit on, that'd be great too.
Yeah. So
one of our first questions comes from one of our board members, Seema Rizvi, who is very active in she's creator of the organization All for One, and I know Seema wants solidarity. She writes, hateful upbringing will only lead children to grow up into hateful adults. What role can the congregation and college play to provide well-rounded education? But specifically, how do we keep youth in houses of worship? I don't know if any of you have an answer for that or thoughts. It might be the burning question of the evening.
And I actually would welcome one of my colleagues jumping in on this. You've heard a lot from me.
They just need to unmute and jump. You're not jumping, Sam.
I mean, the one thing I would say, and this will feel paradoxical, I know, not the expected answer, because of course, I completely understand how do we keep youth in the congregations, in the community. I do think we're slowly seeing what happens when just this process of deep listening, I think, is starting to show students our agenda is not constraining them in any way. Our agenda is trying to make space for them and allow them to set the agenda. And really trying to figure out better, how do we do that? How do we really make space where we connect with the things that matter to them and co-create with them what those new initiatives might look like? I think the midweek buy-it dinners, for instance, are really a profound example to me of the kind of community building that is keeping those students connected with our Home for Jewish Life on campus. And it was entirely student-led and it remains entirely student-driven. And because students recognize that their agency is being supported, they're coming back over and again for that kind of a program. Those are the kinds, to me, that's the magic. That's the magic of a student-centered approach.
I have two questions in the chat, but I'm going to ask one myself before I get to that. The idea of deep listening, I think, is so important, well, just across the board for all of us. But I would be curious when you say, you know, the agency of the students and you listen to them, how did you do that? What did you set up that we might possibly be able to replicate either through our organization, DCIC, or maybe possibly within congregations? I mean, nuts and bolts type of stuff.
Look, I love that. I could talk to, it's really from materials that we got from Hillel International. So I would want to talk to them about how they feel about sharing it, but they know we've shared this widely with our students here, but I would want to check with them. But I could see having a conversation about the specific tools that we used in the outreach that we did and possible ways you might be able to use that. And I would be completely open to thinking about that. We had a very detailed script that we used, adapted for our own purposes here, but we used that script. We did a very intentional outreach process to connect with students that we hadn't necessarily connected with before. And we're in the midst of doing another discovery process now. We reach out, in our context, we reach out to professors, we reach out to administrator colleagues, and we say, these are the kinds of students we're trying to reach out to. Who might you suggest we talk to? And then we would use that person's name to introduce ourselves to them. And we would say, this person that we know you respect and have a lot of respect for thinks very highly of you and thinks you're somebody we might be able to sit down and talk to. And the message that we sent to them was not in order to, grab onto you and bring you into our program. It was to hear your ideas. We think your experience could help us better imagine ways of being a better partner to students. So again, a very open-ended agenda for the conversation. I'd be happy to think with you more fully about what that might look like within your context. And I think, frankly, Hillel would be curious to see whether this could take in that context. I wonder if they'd be open to think it through more fully.
We have a question from Arlene Wilhelm, who said, do you have certified spiritual directors available for the students?
Not in the formal sense that she means. I mean, all of us, I'm an ordained minister. Reverend Lee Hall is an ordained minister. Rabbi Mann is an ordained rabbi. Linda Tuttle has done extensive training, and I've learned a great deal from her. She also is a clinical social worker. As many of you know, she worked with DSS, Department of Social Services, for many years, and draws deeply from the well of Catholic contemplative tradition in her work. So she's deeply familiar with spiritual direction, but none of us have, if you will, formal training in spiritual direction. A number of us are in spiritual direction in one way or another, but don't have formal training in it. That's a great question. I see us as offering spiritual companionship, not direction. That's how we think about it.
That's a lovely phrase.
Mm.
I like that. Susan Carnes-Hecht, who of course is running this meeting. Without her, we'd all be little dots in cyberspace. She says, please give us your thoughts on how DCIC can collaborate directly with the campus center, if you have those thoughts.
I do have a thought about that, actually. And some of you might remember that we did a version of this about 10 years ago, when we were part of President Obama's interfaith challenge. It was a call to campuses across the country to revitalize, invigorate their interfaith work, interreligious work on campus, while also thinking about ways it can have a community impact. And we were one of many campuses, really hundreds of campuses across the country, who participated in that. And we had a regular student interfaith, interreligious group that met across the year. And when it came time to think about what we might do as a project with community impact, students put together a workshop where we designed a program to reach out to area high school youth in area congregations, to have a conversation between college students and area high school students about making the transition from high school to whatever it is that comes next. And we partnered with 5 or so different congregations. We partnered with the Jewish congregations. We partnered with St. John's Lutheran. We partnered with our Pentecostal church in town, with Masjid al-Nur. And we were really thrilled with the outcome from that, and also with our Mormon church in Poughkeepsie. We were really thrilled. Each time we sent about 3 students, one of whom belonged to the tradition of whatever community we were going to. So you always had somebody who understood the community dynamics. And it was a very, I thought, very powerful workshop that we learned a lot from. We tried to organize a return workshop back on the Vassar campus, but we didn't have enough trust building hadn't been done to really make that possible, to bring people onto the Vassar campus. I would be happy to explore whether we might do something like that again. I should say, my colleagues and I would have to work with our students to see if they're interested. So I don't want to promise more than I can give. It might be that we don't have the right, the right cohort of students to pull that off again. So I want to be honest about that and not get ahead of ourselves. But at least in conversation with Rabbi Brian and Miriam Sharif about it, getting ready for this meeting, we thought it's worth putting out there. I don't think we're getting too far out over our skis to mention it as an idea that we would love to think about with you as a possible project. We could re-up the workshop we put together, see what needs tweaking. I think a lot of it was good. I'm sure some of it needs updating. And I wonder what might come from that. I think we have students who could do that very well. And I know, Reverend Lee Hall and Linda Tuttle on this, some of their students in their communities, I think would do an excellent job at this kind of thing. If you're interested, we'd be interested in seeing what might happen on something like that.
Well, I think that's a conversation that will definitely happen. Yeah, I think we can definitely work on that.
And one thing that might help is having, if you will, DCIC, and all of you, of course, are connected with local congregations, having DCIC as a kind of bridge builder, that might help build some of the trust, right? You don't know us as much. I think there might be associations and misunderstandings of what goes on at Vassar and what kind of a community we are. We have students who are very active and vibrant within our religious communities. We're not all the, godless secular place that I think we have associations with as you think about Vassar College. We know those stories are out there, but it's a more complex, richer picture. I often want to say we're in a moment that's both more interreligious and more secular than perhaps it's ever been. I think that's what a number of our scholars are showing us.
Well, I know for a fact that what you say is true. Having Muriel Horowitz and I and several other members of the Interfaith Story Circle came and sat with your students.
Yeah.
And they of all different faiths at the Bayat, and they are not secular.
Yeah.
But they do like to have fun. I myself cannot emphasize how an easy, fun event brings people together and just sort of loosens some of the boxes we put ourselves in.
Yeah. What's the midrash? My rabbi colleagues and friends here help me. Isn't there a midrash that says, on the final day, on the day of judgment, we will be judged for all those things we might have enjoyed, but did not.
Oh, dear heavens.
See?
Yes. One of the suggestions that comes from one of the attendees here is that if perhaps, and you might want to speak to this, if in-person becomes cumbersome, do you think that a virtual presentation has any value?
I certainly do. We get different versions of that from our students.
Yeah.
Some of our students are, as the saying goes, zoomed out. And they tell us that.
Mhm.
I've also experienced incredibly meaningful meetings, including this one, right? Over Zoom. But students really want that connection.
In person. I can
Yeah,
certainly
yeah.
understand that from all of what you've presented. I can certainly see that.
But
as-
I think our colleagues would be open to it, right?
Okay.
I see Rabbi Brian now on my screen, right? I mean, we could do Zoom.
Okay. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
We have a lot to talk about. And whoa, here's a long one. All right. This is from Bruce Epstein, which I believe is the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Poughkeepsie.
Great.
As a smaller denomination, we have occasional contact with students at Vassar who already know about us, but in limited numbers that might not reach critical mass to be recognized as an organized group on campus. If we wish to help coalesce such a group, might that be an option? And if so, how would we go about that?
I think, Bruce, we should talk. We should. I think that's more of a sidebar conversation. It pains me a bit that our UU group, which for so long was able to sustain itself during my time here, really just only over the last 2 years has not been able to keep itself going on campus. You all at the UU Fellowship in Poughkeepsie have really done things right. Over and again, I would hear from students how much they appreciated going to the local UU Fellowship and how utterly welcome that they felt there. I would be happy to think with you, Bruce, about ways we might address that on campus and see if we can't do a bit more to build UU community on campus.
I have one question, which touches upon many of the things we've already talked about, but in fairness to every single question that is submitted, I will read it. This is from our director. It seems key was the call for youth-led voices at the table from the onset in the planning. What are your thoughts in replicating this model of agency for youth for congregations in the community?
I'm happy to speak to it. I don't know if, I could also ask Rabbi Brian. He watched this process, in depth. I'm happy to jump in, but I wonder, do you have any thoughts on that, Rabbi Brian?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And Lorraine, I'm not sure if you can pin me or if folks can just see me in the gallery, that's fine.
Susan job. Susan, you got the rabbi.
Working on it.
Okay. You're going to be pinned.
And not to answer a different question in this question, but I feel like it is deeply related, right? Like this process, as Sam mentioned, came from a very particular approach from Hillel that involves a lot of in-depth one-on-ones with our students, with very intentional questions. And it is a long process that your communities would have to invest a significant amount of time that you might not decide. We did do a shorter model of it that has worked to some extent. But it also makes me wonder, I both grew up in a congregation and came to Vassar having served a congregation where the youth were really siloed off, right? Either we were doing our own thing downstairs separate from whatever was going on in the main sanctuary, which was kind of the experience that I grew up in, or worse, the community that I came from, God forbid a toddler makes too much noise in the sanctuary and 5 to 10 different congregants are immediately turning around to shush the child, to complain to the parent, to, do whatever that kind of says the message, hey, no kids allowed at the prayer service. No kids allowed in the main space that's so essential to our communities. And I hope that your congregations aren't that kind of place. I haven't been to many of them because I just moved. But I do wonder, and obviously you can't police every single congregant who's in your community. And sadly, as many of us know, it just takes one person to say or do the wrong thing to turn people off and turn people away. without pre-established support. But I do wonder kind of what messages are already being sent to youth and to family, especially around the most central places in your communities. And I also know people that very intentionally, right, their youth group president or very active youth member sits on the board and is in those meetings and is a part of those conversations, right? And I don't want to completely knock the siloed off space, right? Youth-centered space is critical. It was a big part of how I came into my Jewish identity. It's a big part of why I'm a rabbi. So I'm not saying like, don't completely get rid of your youth lounge and don't completely get rid of your, youth services, but what are those times for intergenerational connection that you're building? What are those times where, the youth are welcomed fully along with the rest of the community? What steps can you take kind of toward that project, along with investing the time to really develop, because it's not just sitting down one-on-one, right? That's a great first step, but it's also a lot of pre-work of, okay, what are the critical questions that we need to ask right now in this moment to really get at the heart of what we are hoping to figure out, right? It's really different for me to sit down with a student and be like, hey, so how are things going on campus right now? What's new? What's been going on? How's the semester going? And, right, or to sit down with a student and say, so talk to me about a time that you felt really connected on campus, right?
Yeah.
And when I came into this job, without having done ODL, without having done this process, I wouldn't have known to ask that second question. And in other moments, right, like last year, because of COVID, we were asking a lot about isolation and loneliness. We decided that wasn't relevant for this year. So it really is a lot of pre-work, and it really is an intentional process. And I do think there are other steps that communities could take without waiting for Sam and I to connect with Hillel, to get permission to share resources, to then pass on to all of you.
Judy, thank you so much, Rabbi. One of the things before I pardon my blip there for a moment, I was reading the chat, but we lump youth together. I love your the shushing of the babies during church or whatever service. I'll share a brief anecdote and then I'll move on. I was once attending mass at Marist, and there was a little girl loose in the sanctuary. She was climbing up over the chairs. She was making a lot of noise. The mother was chasing after her, and the priest turned around and he said, "She's not bothering anyone here. If you think that's what you have to do, don't worry about it. She doesn't bother us. Let her be." And I've seen that, and it makes a huge, huge difference. But there is that, when we use the word youth, we're throwing in babies and toddlers and elementary school and middle school and teenagers and kids. That's a big population to deal with. And I don't think there's one way to deal with, don't lump them all together, because I'm sure your average teenager does not want to be compared.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we have one, Judy Elkin has a story about Pratt House, and then I think we're getting to a point where, Sam, you might want to wrap this up. So Judy, I guess you are unmuted. Share your story.
Hey, well, first of all, hi, Sam. And
Hi,
I'm
Judy.
very, very excited, not only about Pratt House, which I'm like over the top about, but about possible engagement with DCIC. So we'll leave that there. But years ago, I actually was only to Pratt House only once in my time at Vassar. And that's when Rosalind Carter came to campus. Something you remember, Sam?
That's amazing.
I think that's probably even farther back than you remember.
No, I was not
And
here. I was not here.
Yeah, yeah. As it turns out, I think that Rosalind and Jimmy Carter were and still are, thank goodness, two of the most spiritual public people that I had ever known. And Rosalind I did meet and speak with, and that all took place at Pratt House, and maybe she left her blessing for you. I'd like to think that.
I do too. Thank you, Judy.
All right. Well, I think we're slowly coming to a close. Sam, I can't thank you enough for this. I think you have probably, not only have you talked about passing the torch, you might have. I think there are a lot of ideas swirling around, and I know we will be in touch on many different levels. And Rabbi Brian, I think we will probably be all of your colleagues.
Yeah. And I would also want to give a shout out to Linda Tuttle and Reverend Lee Hall. They have a lot to say on what we've talked about. I would especially be interested in their response to the question around taking this approach into your contexts, our student-centered approach. And of course, both of them are deeply tied both to local congregations and to the campus. And probably have a better read on local congregational dynamics than I do.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah.
To offer your final prayer, I too encourage to stay in touch with us. It's our 50th year. We're going to have a lot of things going on. Please feel free to visit our website, DuchessCountyInterfaith.org. Yep, I always want to put more in there than there is. Please visit our website. It is updated. You can find out what's going on. Subscribe to our newsletter. Please do. We have a newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks or so with all and interesting articles. Sam, you might appear in it. You never know. And that, sign up on our website, office at DuchessCountyInterfaith.org, and just ask to be put on. For those of you who do Facebook, or 477333. Sam, I can't thank you enough. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. It's really wonderful to be with you. There's much more we could talk about, and I look forward to the continuing conversation. By way of a closing prayer, I found quite inspiring, maybe others of you saw this as well, the words from a colleague of professor at Yale, Miroslav Volf, the Ukrainian theologian and pastor, Fyodor Rakhniets, forgive my pronunciation, who is in Kiev now, in Kyiv now. And I'm adapting from a podcast that he gave recently for this prayer. Let us pray. O Holy One, remind me and all of us on a daily basis that we are humans, that we are not just to remain, because it is crucial in the midst of hell not to lose our humanity, but to preserve it and to show it and to demonstrate it, because that is what people need most at this moment. So may we, your beloved people, embody the spiritual and political power of what it means to be your love in this world. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.